Seth Haberman is the CEO of Visible World and has been involved in our industry for many, many years, and I'm very excited to have him back.
Thank you very much. And I just want you to know that this set is actually a reproduction of the United Business Class Lounge at San Francisco Airport, in case anyone is recognizing it. So we have a spectacular panel, and Seth is at. So we're going to try and get everyone involved, and thank you very much for Tracy. Last year I asked Tracy, I said, I'd really like to do a panel here, not as a participant, but to run one. And she gave me that opportunity at the end of the panel. I said, I really have to thank you. And she said, thank you for what? I said, well, I've never actually done a panel before. And she looked at me with a sort of horrified thing. She said, I'm glad you told me that afterwards, because otherwise I wouldn't have let you do it. Well, thank you very much. So we've got an amazing group of people here who represent a lot of different facets of the interactive industry. And the question I put to the panel is, interactive TV advertising, who's going to click? And the notion I have is that this year there aren't questions anymore about whether interactive television is going to be deployed between Dish Networks, DirecTV, Canoe. We're going to have tens of millions of households. And so the real question that begets us is, how big a business is it going to be? Who are the type of people going to click? And what are the right types and successful types of applications? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a quick introduction of why I've chosen these people here and start them off and then ask them to introduce themselves, and then we'll go into the panel. We'll go a couple of rounds of questions and then hopefully leave some time for questions from the audience. So we have, and we didn't thematically organize it quite the way I thought it was, but we have over here four individuals from companies that are some of the leading providers of what I'd call advanced advertising technology. Peter Lowe from Sequence, Ellen Dudar from Fourth Wall Media, who most of you know as Biap, Paul Woodkey from OpenTV, and Nick Troiano from Black Arrow. We also have three companies that I think really understand individual behavior on the internet. And so we have Erin Hunter from Comscore, and Adam Gerber from Quantcast, and John Heller from Freewheel. And then we have four of the leading deployers of interactive technology. And so we have Keith Kaiserman from DirecTV, and Kevin Smith from Comcast, and Sean Bruner, you guys should wave from HSN, and Jim Turner from Canoe. And lastly, but not really lastly, we have Yosef Tuma from Accenture, who's going to talk a lot about how he helps media companies monetize these types of businesses. So before the introduction, I wanted to come up with what I thought was an appropriate quotation about interactive television. I don't know how many of you saw the movie The Devil's Advocate. You're supposed to give me some. It's interactive. So it's one of my favorite movies, and there's a scene where the devil, I think he's named John Milton, played by Al Pacino in the movie, and I apologize for my not doing a good Al Pacino imitation, is talking to his young lawyer, Kevin, about one of the very rapacious partners. And the quote is, and he's talking about this character, Eddie Barzoon, and he says, "The next 1,000 years is right around the corner, Kevin. Eddie Barzoon, take a good look, because he's the poster child for the new millennium. These people, it's no mystery where they come from. You sharpen the human appetite to the point where it can split atoms with its desire. You build egos the size of cathedrals, fiber optically connect the world to every eager impulse, grease even the dullest dreams with $1 green gold-plated fantasies, until every human becomes an aspiring emperor." Is that our promise for interactive television? So with that, I'd like the panel, if you can go around and give me a quick introduction to all of you.
Hello all, I'm Peter Lowe with InSequence, and InSequence provides programmers and distributors and advertisers with the capability to create and deploy lots of interactive television programming and advertising content dependably, affordably, and over every television platform.
Hi, I'm Ellen Dudar with Fourth Wall Media, and We have several products, but the common theme is that we enable connections between programmers and advertisers in the audience. So we do that with an eBIF platform to help enable the set-top boxes, programming on both content and advertising, and then also reporting back on the usage of that engagement.
Paul Woodkey with OpenTV. A couple of different ways that we engage in interactivity. The first from our back office management platform for the use of scheduling for all advertising, principally in the cable business here in the United States, and then the larger part of our company, the middleware division, where we have incorporated interactivity into middleware that's also available for distribution, as along with data measurement capabilities.
Nick Triano from Black Arrow. Short and sweet is we are an advertising management platform that focuses on cross-platform monetization, specifically VOD and broadband as the gateway to what we consider new TV, on-demand consumption. So a lot of what we really focus on is in the world of VOD is not technology, but how will we actually make a viable VOD marketplace occur in the next 2, 3, and number of years.
I think with the panel this size, it has to be quick, right? I'm Erin Hunter. I'm Executive Vice President with ComScore, and we measure all things, we are the leader worldwide in measuring all things digital.
Adam Gerber, Chief Marketing Officer at Quantcast, and our focus, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, is on understanding audiences, really with the goal of making them addressable. Our vision is that data has to become a component of the media transaction in order to allow advertisers to reach the people that they want to advertise to, and media companies and publishers to actually sell them the audiences that matter.
Hi, my name is John Heller, CEO of Freewheel. Our flagship product is called Monetization Rights Management. It's designed for this new world where people watch anything they want, wherever they want. So it lets clients like Turner Broadcasting or Vivo or Major League Baseball distribute their shows across the internet, television devices, mobile phones, deal with the politics of that. Who's allowed to sell ads, who's not? How do I prevent sales channel conflict? Sell into it like it's TV, regardless of where someone's watching it, and then track and pay all the various parties involved because the actors need some, the distribution partners need some, and in order to make the economy work, everyone's got to get paid right.
Hi, Keith Kaisman, DirecTV. DirecTV's objective really is to be the best video distribution platform out there. From a sales standpoint, we look to leverage that national scale and bring interactivity and enhanced programming to that subscriber experience. And as the eyeballs follow to those programs, allow the advertisers to reach those potential consumers.
I think this works. There you go. Kevin Smith, I'm with Comcast. This is an interesting panel. Appreciate the opportunity to come up. ITV for us is of an initiative with high interest. We don't claim to have all the answers. We've got 12 million homes deployed with ITV capability. And it has been really a collaboration with many folks on the panel, many folks out in the audience, to try to understand this technology and translate it into a business model that's scalable. So, you know, I come here to learn as much as to speak, because we don't have all the answers, but are very excited about the interest in this. It's got to turn into a business.
So I haven't been doing these for about one a week for the last 3 or 4 weeks. I tried to, in honor of Tracy, have a little different slide and take on this than the normal HSN. But we've had some version of interactivity running live since 2005, 24/7. We're in a little over 25 million homes now. So what we bring to this panel is what we've seen, why people are clicking today. And just real quickly, the learnings we've seen are the bug or the CTA or the prompt or whatever you want to call it. When we launch on a digital channel away from our live TV, we get very low usage. Surprise. But when we have that bug or that prompt, it immediately goes off the chart in terms of usage. So that's been our biggest learning. Second is convenience. For our customers versus ordering on the phone, they can order about 3 or 4 times faster. So it's as simple as them coming in, getting out, doing what they want to do, and you get a lot of usage because of that. And then lastly, I don't know if you can see on the lower part there, but people still want to watch TV. So even in instances where we've had to launch on a digital channel with an overlay, we still play the audio feed of the live behind it, so they feel like they're live HSN. So.
And Sean is quickly in the lead for the most creative set of slides.
And the Dead Kennedys are from San Francisco. So.
Hi, I'm Jim Turner, and I head up product management at Canoe. Canoe is a joint venture of the 6 largest MSOs and cable operators in the country, and we're chartered to build a national footprint for interactive television and advanced advertising, build a platform that helps simplify and encourage the buying, selling, and monitoring, reporting of those products.
Hi, I'm Steph Tuma, a partner with Accenture in our digital transformation practice. We look in the world and determine how digital media and new technologies change the business models and operating models of the industry across the value chain. Digital consumers in terms of how to better engage with consumers to create a better relationship and more loyalty. Digital monetization models determine how companies will position themselves and be able to create services for each other and to the consumer to make new revenue channels or to adjust their existing ones. And then digital supply chain for using digital media to help optimize their operations.
Thank you very much. And so we've used about 1/3 of our time now with these introductions. So Aaron, I'm going to start off with you. Who's a natural-born clicker and why?
The natural-born clicker. ComScore did some research that we've published. We've now done 2 versions of that, looking at the internet consumer and who is actually clicking on display advertising, because the internet had gotten into such a case where we're using clicks as the means to which we're buying and selling and measuring whether something worked. So ComScore looked over time at a group of people and identified those who clicked on display advertising and profiled them. We found a few scary things that when I've said this on panels in the past, I found the agencies in the crowd start shivering. What we found was that 6% of consumers account for the top 50% of clicks, which means that for an advertiser, a publisher, or an agency, anybody in the ecosystem, in the internet ecosystem that's relying on the click as a measure of success, they're really only addressing, in the large case, those 6% of consumers. The next, the 80-20 of it was essentially 16% of consumers accounted for 80% of all click behavior. And beyond that, they're not a demographically desirable consumer or household for most marketers. The average income was $40,000 on household income. And the reason we did that work, and we've done it 2 years in a row now, was to really try to get, for the internet, to try to get buyers and sellers off of using click as a measurement for whether something succeeds. It doesn't mean that the advertising or the content isn't valuable and consumers don't like it. It just means that if we are relying on click behavior as the measure of success, we're really missing the boat. So that's natural-born clickers work, and I'm happy to cite more numbers if that's helpful.
So no, that's a great and depressing way to start this panel, but
my apologies.
But I asked you the question. So
it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It
right.
just means don't rely on clicks.
So let me ask you, Sean, your business depends on action and people taking action. Do you find there are people who are much more likely to be customers, and do you define them? Is that part of your business model?
So we do have a demographic that's primarily women 30 to 50. But what's interesting is while we thought the interactive group might skew differently or younger, we found it's pretty much the same group across the business. And even in focus groups, we've had a much older demographic come in. And because it's the same process they're used to on the phone today, once they just didn't know that digital part of the remote existed. They didn't know what up, down, select was. Once they get in there, they fly right through the app and come back and love it and use it.
So I know, Seth, you've worked on some of the modeling of this business. When you've looked at that, do you look at there's only going to be a narrow demographic of people who click? Is that how you've approached it? Or do you think that things will happen as the technology becomes broader deployed and people learn about it, that's actually going to grow?
Oh, and there's kind of two sides to that. I think the first part is around just adoption and learning, which I think is going to be something that is a big part of that, especially as things scale across nationally. I think that the other side is really the idea of what engagement really is going to mean and what the measurement's going to be in terms of having an impact, especially in a more passive viewing experience versus something that is more active like it is online. And so from the valuation of that in terms of the engagement and being able to even tie it to brand engagement onto other platforms, I think that aspect of it is on top of what we would consider just your general click-through or response.
Give me the 10-second version of that, because I didn't follow. What's the bottom line on that?
So the bottom line is that the click-through is not being looked at as, the click-through rate is not being part as the only part of where the revenue is coming from. Already from a conservative perspective, it's going to be relatively low in a lot of the models that are advertising-based as a starting point. But the engagement that would come from it that could be used on other platforms is an area where there's additional valuation and thus monetization.
And so let me, Adam, Quantcast is going, if I understand correctly, from a company that profiled activity on websites to selling addressability solutions for the audience. How much of your business is dependent on the formulation of people actually clicking, or is it more based on passive media?
It really depends on the marketer and the type of program that we're trying to help them deliver. Clicking or conversion for a performance-based marketer is an important metric. And looking at ROI or those types of back-end data points. For brand marketers, it's a very different calculation in terms of how they look at the value of advertising and the value of engagement and exposure and the things that were just being discussed. Seth, you asked us to be, to stir this up a bit. I'd like to throw out the notion that I think the premise of the panel is flawed because for a variety of reasons. Number one,
I asked you to mix it up with the panel members, not me.
Well, I'm going to do it with you. First off, as an ex-agency guy and now as someone on the measurement side, I'm very concerned that focusing everyone on clicks in the nascent stages of the ITV industry is going to kill it. The web industry the internet advertising space went through 10, 15 years, we're still going through it, period where brand marketers just don't get the value of online advertising because they were conditioned up front to think of the click as the only thing that's valuable. And I think we're going to put ourselves at a huge disadvantage if that's how we frame the discussion. And I think...
But with all due respect...
Wait, I've got one more for you, Seth.
With all due respect, some people do click, even if they live in trailer parks or whatever Erin's going to describe them as. And there's a business there, right?
There's a very small business there, and I think that everyone in the room should be focused on the larger business. The stats that Erin pointed out about clickers on the web, it's a great study, it's great data, but here's the problem with looking at just that snapshot and making a correlation to what's going to happen in the TV space. Most marketers, that's intrusive banner-based advertising. That's not factoring in search, which by definition, which is actually the larger monetized component of online advertising today. That has a dramatically different texture to who's clicking. People who are raising their hand are going and clicking, looking for product. And more importantly, brand marketers are having all sorts of engagement with their customers and their prospects directly on their brand sites. And that has absolutely nothing to do with the banner ads or the impressions that are being delivered through advertising. I'd be much more interested talking about ITV from the standpoint of the applications that are going to evolve, that are going to be direct to consumer.
And I'm sure there's another panel you can be on to talk about all those things.
Well, but as an extension to what Adam's saying, and it's an interesting direction to go. If we think about clicking and how it relates to marketing only to how you augment a 30 or 15-second spot, we're sort of missing the point here. In the spot advertising market, after automobile, what's the second largest category? It's programmers. It's programming content of some kind. It's trying to get you to watch my program, whether it's another TV show, something else on another network that I own, or a movie that I'm doing. And when interactivity becomes viewed as a way for the programmer to make their content stickier and more interesting and more valuable to the viewer, that's marketing in and of itself, but in a different context. but it has value, it has monetary value, and it's something that we need to measure and account for.
So I've lost control of the panel already. There goes my first one. Go for it.
I'll give it
But
back to
I
you,
actually have a
Seth.
question. Actually, I'm going to start you off with a question and then just answer whatever you want. But I am determined to get through my script.
Go ahead.
Seth, I just wanted to just highlight one thing.
that's not fair.
That Peter will embrace is we're talking about video. Video is an immersive, engaging experience, which is light years difference in terms of value to an advertiser than display. So I think we should, to get back to your panel, we're talking about TV, which is video, which is different economics, metrics, and things that we need to contemplate. Sorry, Peter.
Peter, let me
now.
ask you one, because you come, if we say people who click are a demographic, you come from two networks which were wildly successful by exploiting a specific demographic, right? You came from MTV and BET, which made a living of saying we're going to go after a specific demographic. Is that a way to think about it, that there's a demographic?
I think that's a way to think about it on a network-by-network basis, which is, I think, sort of a different question from the one that's been addressed so far on the panel. But so let me just go back to a couple of things that have been said. So I agree with what you're saying, Paul, and I just want to take this back to the television because you're all talking about what it looks like on the web, and I mean, the first question is we don't know if it's going to be the same yet, exactly, right? So from our experience on television, I'm just going to throw out a couple of statistics. So there are two statistics that I want to throw out. One is that if you, and I'm just going to use in Sequence's experience in the
I
marketplace.
feel the answers to your statistics fermenting already, but go ahead.
Yeah, you know, everybody's just waiting, right? Okay, but the statistics are good, so everybody's going to be happy. We've done, you know, hundreds of ads, interactive ads, and we haven't seen any correlation between the ad demographic and the opt-in rates. Okay, so that could lead you.
What's the ad demographic? Who it's targeted for?
What the product is and who you expect that demographic to be and what the opt-in rates are. Okay, so what we do see is the opt-in rates are driven by how compelling the advertisement is and what you ask people to do in the opt-in. Okay, so I'll give you a really simple example. We did an interactive car ad, and the opt-in said something like, you know, click here if you want more information. And we got a 1% opt-in rate. And a week later, we changed the ad to click here if you want to win a free car. And the opt-in rate went up 800%, right? But let me just finish the statistics, and then you can come back to this. Okay, so but the opt-in rates tend to be pretty good on advertising, but I do want to take it to the content side because I agree with you. So on the content side, the opt-in numbers, and this is different from a click-through rate now, right? It's just the people who are taking advantage of interactivity. The opt-in rate percentages are so high that they have to transcend demographics. Okay, so again, I'm going to throw out some statistics.
So,
okay, go ahead. Go ahead and interrupt.
Let's get your statistics. Get them out quickly, and then
okay.
John will.
So typically speaking, on a television program that's interactive, 20% of the people that have that interactivity available to them will actually use it. Okay, so you're already transcending narrow demographics like MTV or BET. And those numbers go all the way up to 50% in our experience. And the other factor is that the more people have interactivity, the more exposed they are to interactivity, the higher those opt-in rates go. And what those opt-in rates do, to the marketing point, is lead directly to higher ratings. So forget click-through rates, forget CPMs, the ratings are just higher because a lot of people opt in and they stay on the television program longer. So Mark Garner, who was on a panel this morning, was on a panel a few months ago and said what we built for them for the History Channel increased their ratings by 20%.
Okay. I have a different quote than your movie reference. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And I feel very weird as an internet person talking to a TV audience where I feel like I'm the history and you're describing as if you're doomed to repeat it. Look, when banners first came out, they had 5 and 6% click-through rates that dropped 9%. They dropped down to 1%. Someone put a big fancy click here and red flashing letters. They went back up to 20% in the beginning. Fundamentally, there's one thing and one thing only that drives conversion, which is do you show the ad to someone who cares about it at that moment? If I'm typing in the keywords new truck, it means I care about that at that moment. If I'm sprawled on my couch watching a movie and I get an offer to learn about a mortgage application, I'm not clicking. The click-through rates and the implied CPMs on entertainment and long-form online are appalling, and it's literally the wrong metric. If it's an impulse buy or a promotion for another piece of content, that makes perfect sense because that's where my frame of mind is. But if it's for full commerce, then I would argue, look, that just doesn't work. There's exposure and reach frequency and a number of other things that are quite valuable. Click is the wrong thing to focus on.
Just to make sure everyone understands the perspective of what I think we're talking about in terms of the precipitous decline in click-through rate. We've gone from 6, 7, 8% click-through rates when internet advertising first launched to, I know you guys have put out a study on this, I think we estimated sub 0.1% on average, and I think those numbers, you're close. So that gives you perspective on how quickly over 15 years high performance rates on interaction have declined on the web.
So wait, before we pile on there, I'm going to juxtapose, you know, the amount of DR we see on TV is going up. And presumably people are running it, and Kevin, maybe you can weigh in on this, because somebody's calling in. Maybe they're not clicking because that's not available now, but they are calling in, they are reacting to it. How do you juxtapose listening to, you know, the lachrymose view of clicking and people actually responding to ads and advertisers increasingly buying your services for things that have some degree of interactivity?
Yeah, the click argument is interesting. We think of it.
Are you learning?
I said I came here to learn. I'm learning. I'm going to learn a lot more, I'm sure. And certainly have a point of view on this. We think television is a separate medium. The currencies associated with the evaluation of that medium are established. The currencies for interactive television are evolving to quickly associate that with internet. We're hesitant about that at best. Just consider the environment alone where the ad's placed, the enhancement to the ad, whether it's an addressable ad, it's a telescope to a long form ad, and what is the objective achieved for the advertiser. So to your point about direct response, you can't discount direct response. If you look at network TV, it's the top category, and it's probably not going to go away. Direct response advertisers, I think, have a vociferous appetite to play in television. However, it's all about impulse. And the ability for us to offer impulse capabilities, click to call, buy on demand, really will allow us to tap that vertical. Until then, I think you're going to see the learnings come from every different category and the response rates from every different category varying, and no one knows, and no one has the answers. And the interaction rates and the click rates and the response rates, maybe they're grounded in one medium, but I think it's very, very premature to jump and migrate quickly to a metric that built another medium.
This is one of the questions for the panel. Nick, you've
You've
lived in both sides of this world, right? You were at Maven, you had those capabilities. Black Arrow, what's your perspective?
So I think, I may say something that some people on this panel might not like, but
Shocking.
I think, yeah, right? So I think when you look at interactivity, it's not just, and I think Peter's point was well taken, it's not just about advertising. I think what you can see is, and we should see, is applications built by programmers for program-specific ad sales endeavors. Not audience-based ad sales. It's how TV is bought today, in the general sense, for brand. Obviously, audience plays in control of that. But as programmers embrace more interactive capabilities that bring in advertisers, that tie into a program, I think you will start to see a lot better, more effective use of interactivity on TV. So in the general sense, I think our industry has a unique opportunity to not go down and rush quickly to audience-based buys. I think we should maintain the integrity to try to maintain television strategies a little bit, and this is different because I came from online, and we believed in online, we believed in audience, we believed in segmentation, and what we found is no one knows how to sell it. No one can sell it. The only people that know how to sell effectively today are the guys in the TV ad sales because they're still selling 99%. So we should be looking at interactive interactivity to embrace how they sell, not how we think it should be sold, not about how the data drives it, but how a big TV buy is going to be made with an interactive application made by somebody that pulls advertisers in. And that's what I learned from Maven coming into the TV world.
So Keith, you sell this more than anyone, right?
Yeah, I mean, and we do have some answers. You know, we've been doing it for about 5 years now, and it's very mature. And, you know, Adam was a pioneer, was the first advertiser when he was working at P&G to be on our platform. And essentially, you're right. It's a natural extension of what advertisers are doing on a national scale. You know, whether it's within NFL Sunday Ticket and they're looking to really reach that core football fan, they purchase, again, our enhanced programming, and within that application, they have the opportunity to give a brochure to that advertiser right through their remote control. And I know my slide was up there very quickly, but just as a platform, you know, we delivered last year 1.8 billion impressions. We don't count them really in clicks. We do deliver that back to the advertiser, and have partnered with Kantar Media for over 3 years now, because that measurability is so important. It's really the beginning of that ROI. But for a national advertiser, the scale between us and a Dish and then, you know, the Cablevision and someday Canoe really allows them to take that piece, and whether it's 10 or 20% additional spend, to really engage with that consumer and create a dialogue with that TV set.
So what do they get for the 10 or 20%?
They really have the ability within TV to measure some ROI. And, you know, TV used to be a monologue. The TV just spoke to you. It's really a dialogue. You know, through that remote control, which people are using every day, much more than just changing the channel and the volume within our households and now a lot of different platforms to connect to that consumer. So, you know, whether it's a brochure, a sweepstakes, or even, you know, free sample. It's that true connection, that last mile, so to speak.
Yeah.
So Ellen, you know, the fourth wall, and I was curious, for an interactive company, why a wall? Like,
Why a wall? Because we're breaking through finally.
So it's the fourth broken wall, or
It's just so everyone knows, the fourth wall is that imaginary plane between a stage and the audience. And so when an actor turns and talks to the audience directly, that means they're breaking the fourth wall. And so we also felt like it's, you know, we're breaking through the barriers. There's been this impenetrable glass barrier for years that you couldn't get through on TV. So whether it's technology or the actual applications, that's what's happening now. And we do think it's that inflection point. So that's why we chose to change our name now. But to go back to some of these points, all of these are tools for enabling that connection with the audience. And it's really up to the marketers to determine what are we trying to accomplish. You know, do we want to drive a response? In which case, then we should be there to collect the response. If the video is so powerful and can elicit this emotional reaction, why not have something there that can
right? But we want
to.
That's a very good generic argument. But the question I'm trying to get at is how many people will do it, and when will they do it, and what are the success stories? Because I know the promise. My question is, tell me about the reality.
Okay, I'll tell you about the reality, but let me finish. There's also other drivers, though. So the response is one. Increasing dwell time and richness of that experience are others. So all of these different features don't necessarily mean that I'm clicking to get a brochure or clicking to call. I may be drilling into a telescoping VOD that has a targeted video for me. It may be something that, you know, I'm really increasing the time spent with the brand. It's not just about the response. So at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of data that we have from the earlier trials that were kind of about, you know, did it work? Did anybody click? And then the adoption rate, you know, you get some skewed data in there because people are just sampling it because it's something new on TV. Now, through the technology and through eBIF that's rolling out, now we've got these tools in our toolkit. And it's time to now start crafting the right messages and organizing them and now testing out the messaging and the campaigns. Where I think prior to that, we really were testing out the technology and the platform.
So I just want to get to Jim, because Jim's got a lot riding on this. You know, the slide you put up was, I think, 25 million eBIF homes. And the first application will be interactivity, and assume some of that's for advertising.
Right.
It's going to be a business?
Do we have any business? Is that what you said?
No, will it be a business?
Will it be a business? Yes, it will be a business. But I want to go back and touch on a couple things that build in that. I think if you go back to 1998 and you look at websites and you look at websites today, things have evolved enormously. And I think that's part of what we're going to look at with interactivity. In the mid-90s, I ran an interactive television studio for Digital Equipment Corporation, and we did a lot of testing. And at that point, one of the things that I remember was we watched people while they were watching something we wanted them to interact with, and they were sitting like this, and the remote was over there on the table. right? Now as you start doing that, now they're sitting up and the remote's sitting next to them because we've trained them at least to bring the remote closer because they're doing something with it. We've really got to get these tools in the hands, as Nick was pointing out, of the programmers, because advertising works best when you put it in the context of the program material. And we're really at the point where we've got training wheels we've got to put on this, as we're getting footprint in various places, to get people used to the fact that they can interact with television. This is something new. So from our standpoint, yes, the industry is projecting 25 million EBIF homes. Canoe is following behind that. We have our first product that's coming along in that area, and yes, we do believe there's a business.
And so just to sort of summarize your point on this is that the availability of the technology and the familiarity with it will change the behavior.
Yes, I believe so.
So it's not natural, it's nurture-born clickers, not natural-born clickers.
And even if you wanted to go back to what we were saying earlier about the decline in click rates for just display advertising, the part of that was because people used to believe that you had to click on the ad in order to get any more information about it, as opposed to using the internet to go to the navigation bar. There are so many other ways that people can navigate around. It doesn't mean that advertising impression didn't do anything. It just means that the decline in the click rate is a result of the fact that the consumer has learned to navigate in such a way that they don't have to click it anymore. It doesn't mean they didn't get the impression. It just means they didn't have to click because they could do it many other ways.
But Seth, where you were going, you're asking, you keep coming around to this quantification question of how many, and what you're really trying to do is to quantify a technological change, and how does the technological change quantify how people are going to do that. I go back to what John or Adam said earlier, because that's really what the answer is. If you type new truck into a search engine, you can probably bet that somebody will click on what comes up on the next page. Why? Because that is the perfect example of what addressability is. And I suggest for this panel that if we and this industry, if we keep getting interaction in front of getting the right ad to the right person, then we've still got the cart before the horse. And if you deliver the right ad to the right person, whether you measure it by clicking or whether you measure it by the fact that they stayed and watched the ad instead of going to the kitchen and making a sandwich, you've achieved something.
So interactivity will work, or the engagement will work as part of an addressability solution.
Yes.
So let me start another round, and I know you guys, you're fantastic, and I got to everyone this first round, right? There's no one I left out? So the second, I wanted to start out with a slightly different take on this one, and this is for Peter and Nick. I know in 2009, both of you, I think, took roles as running these companies. And this is an industry that is notorious for chewing people up. So my first question is...
Good start, thank you.
If you knew then what you knew now, would you have done it? Is there enough, are you getting enough, is there a wind at your back? Are you feeling like, you guys have had some very positive announcements.
I feel better today than I did in 2009. So yes, I would take it, and I feel considerably better just sitting on this panel. I mean, look at the firepower that is in the room today. It's totally different than it was several years ago. So, I mean, here are a couple of things. You said it earlier, but Kagan is saying 42.9 million EBIF homes at the end of 2011. And that's 89% of every digital box there is out there. And you couple that with satellite, and you have 70 to 75 million interactive homes in the United States at the end of next year. I mean, how many of you have been in this room year after year after year waiting for this to happen? So,
but that's exactly the point of this panel is I'm taking it for granted. I know you do very hard work and things like that to get it working. I'm taking it for granted that it's working. Now you're faced with, oh, okay, it's working. You're going to make real money from it.
Well, okay, so you can't really just take that for granted, because that's been probably the biggest impediment the industry's faced for ever since its inception, right? So it's a huge deal that it's actually happening. So scale is critical. Do I think it's going to be a business? Yes. And so television advertising is a $70 billion business today, right? And everybody will agree that there's going to be some level of premium for interactivity and addressability and advanced advertising. And just make up your numbers. Okay, so let's say let's say it's going to be a 10% premium. A lot of people think higher, but let's go conservative. 10% premium, that means this business is going to be a $7 billion business. 5% premium, $3.5 billion business. Parks Associates just released their projection that advanced advertising revenue is going to go from $130 million this year to $4 billion in 2014. Okay, so you have numbers. Let's say it's $4 billion. Let's say it's $20 billion. Let's say it's $30 billion. Those are real numbers. We're talking about real dollars.
You're assuming all advertising is going to be interactive. I mean, you're making the assumption every ad is going to be every ad that's currently
I am,
spent.
but you scale it back. So take my 10% number and say in 2014, 25% are going to be interactive, right? So you just knock that number down by 75%, still billions, right? But the point that I want to make for this group is what percentage of that revenue is going to be available to all of us? And again, you can sort of make up your number, but if the business is a $4 billion business, they're big numbers for the people sitting on this panel.
Yeah, I'll go quick. So Black Arrow is maniacally focused on VOD. It is, as some of the announcements that have made this year, Comcast, Bresnan, and others, Cox, have actually decided to spend significant amounts of money to VOD. There's 7 billion hours of VOD programming every year on the cable infrastructure. I think it's about less than 1% monetized. So Seth, what I find most compelling, the answer is I would do it again, not because I want to deal with the trials and not getting paid and all the fun stuff that I never thought was possible.
Welcome
think
to my world.
We are in the, yeah, I don't think they're going to stop. We're on the precipice of, online is different than TV. VOD and interactive on the TV is TV. So we're talking about primetime shows being shifted, time shifted through DVR and VOD. So it's that Heroes or CSI episode being consumed on an on-demand basis with some level of opportunity for interactivity, and the market is wide open. And it's TV dollars.
There's something that interactive competes with, which is just flat dynamic. So there's only X amount of hours that are going to be watched, and there's only Y amount of ads that can show up during those hours. So you've got your classic sponsorships, or I'm the only car company that can show up during this show, where it may be a more static classic ad, but that stuff in the branding half of the internet is generating about 15 times the price of the direct marketing ads when you're on an entertainment property. I'm cutting search out of this for statistical reasons. So the engagement stuff that's been described here about someone spending more time with the brand, I expect that would drive a great deal of revenue. That's very valuable. But we should be careful when we say click. Do we mean someone is interested in learning more about the show or understanding more about the brand? That's like rich media online. That does very, very well. Are they going to buy the truck right now or buy the airline ticket right now, which is what the word click tends to mean online?
No,
probably not.
I think we're using the former. And let me ask you, Jim, I always hear, and I was at the 4A's yesterday, and if I had a nickel for every time I heard the word ROI, we wouldn't, we'd have a revenue model. So how important is ROI? How important is your thinking about creating that ROI model for your potential advertisers on the service you're enabling?
As you said, everybody has talked about an ROI, and yes, there should be an ROI. So I could leave it at that. But I think I just want to continue this discussion because I think it's interesting. One of the, as I was saying a little bit earlier, if we're really focused just on clicks in interactive advertising, go back to what I said earlier. I think we're missing the broader piece, which is that we need to be beginning to build a behavior in the viewer that is an interactive medium. And so if some of those clicks are on things which may not be directly advertising related, maybe they're things which are retaining, maybe it's trivia, maybe it's something going on in the program that's actually increasing engagement and increasing the participation of the viewer in the program, then when that behavior begins to grow, it's going to be a lot easier to start to generate ROI and to generate return on things which actually have monetization attached to them. So I think again, to the point earlier, if we're just thinking about clicking in interactive advertising, we're thinking too narrowly. We need to be thinking about building it as an interactive and a personalized medium as the next generation of television. The next, as we like to say, the next big digital media is television. And if we can achieve that, then the monetization will follow, just as it has on the web.
So there's an interesting thing. B Sky B, I think, has had some degree of interactivity for almost 10 years. And if you look, and so that's a pretty good litmus test. I know they're a little different on the other side of the pond, but we'll assume that they're related to it in enough of sense. They've basically pulled off interactivity on most of their sort of narrative-driven channels. But where interactivity is very successful is on the sort of things that have this extemporaneous aspect to it, the sports, a lot of sports and game shows and things like that. So that what it seems to me as a casual viewer of this is that the content is got to be closely related to the functionality. That throwing interactivity onto The Godfather just is not going to work because it's too orthogonal. You know, click here for Sonny to die in the toll booth. You know, it's just not going to.
Well, I think that programming in general, just based on where things are moving, especially anything that's linear, is more and more getting into event-based and being able to have that type of relationship so that interactivity does tie relatively well to it. And I think that on top of the fact that programming traditionally as a medium is one where the relationship with a channel, relationship is basically based on someone serving you and providing you things, is a type of state of mind that consumers will have when they're actually getting engaged with the television. So they can be, if they get a trusting relationship or a new type of relationship that's, again, more interactive, it does provide a lot more stickiness to it than to a place where you're the one choosing where you want to go. So from a serving type of relationship with the consumer, I think that does, again, give a good ability to create that new relationship that we're talking about.
Aaron, let me ask you a question. So the study Natural Born Clickers was not about video. Has ComScore studied video? Is that something that you're looking about?
Sure, we've done a significant amount of work in video. In fact, at the end of this month, and I can't, it's under embargo right now, but I've seen the preliminary results of some work that we've done that we will make public at the ARF at the end of March that specifically quantifies the lift, the incremental lift off of, with banner being a baseline, and then looking at the lift of video advertising in a few different formats. And without revealing everything, the engagement that we looked at, so this was not looking at clicks. I think I agree significantly with what Adam was saying earlier about that being the wrong metric. But it was looking at the engagement with the brand, the engagement with the advertised brand, and shows very positive results for different video formats and their ability to, regardless of clicking, their ability to get consumers to engage with the brand, spend some time. I think that most of this audience will be quite pleased with the results of that work. So again, it'll be released in the ARF, and I'm sure on our website at the end of March.
Fantastic. So couple of new questions to throw out to the panel. John, we've talked about video versus text, and I'm curious, do you see a difference between online video and television video? And what drives your thinking about this?
I think Nick actually said it. If you're watching a TV show, you're watching TV. I've got a computer hooked up to a flat panel. I watch it from my couch. It happens to come through the internet. That's television. If I'm watching some postage stamp video while they're sort of cooking some new dish and I'm reading the recipe next to it, that's closer to a web page. So when you're talking about long form in the narrative, as you described it, it's television. But it starts to have blurry lines into what the internet calls rich media, which is a short snippet of something that I'm topically interested in right then and there. I'm not sure how you guys sliced it when you looked at it, but we've seen the stuff. Our clients are TV companies, so they're selling it like TV, and they're generating the premium CPMs that TV garners, as opposed to a problem the internet has, which is a vast amount of oversupply on display in general, where if you are not selling the premium stuff, you're having a difficult time.
And apropos of nothing in this panel, why did Viacom pull Colbert off of Hulu?
I won't pretend to know why. I could tell you why I might think that. The brands on TV are the networks, but they're also the shows. So the Colbert Report is a brand in its own right. If you want to sell it at that high price, the $30, $40, $50 CPM, then you need scale, as was mentioned, which means it needs to be one ad, one forecast that runs in Colbert everywhere. The way Hulu physically operates today, it's not that liquid. What executes on the Colbert.com site is not the same buy that can execute on Hulu. So operationally, you won't get the same dollar value across the same scale. So that's a little bit of an ops issue. that's a reason.
Just curious while we had you here. So, one of the things that I'd heard is when NBC showed a show, and I think it was about 4 years ago in the 60s, they sold along with that music from the 60s, and it was rumored to have the highest sell-through rates of any show that was selling along because the context was so great. In other words, they were selling 60s music on a show about the 60s. That sounds very good and that sounds very compelling. Paul, is that something you can systematize? Is there a way you can sort of say content, how do you put the right things up, the right content and the right, advertising together? Is that something that Open TV thinks about?
So I think you can create that linkage, and I think it's an extension of my often stated passion about addressability. The negative thing that you have to look at there was, and I don't remember the exact statistics, but half a decade ago when people were talking about in-program advertising and the Coke can sitting on the Seinfeld kitchen counter and everything, there aren't enough minutes to monetize in that way. So I think it's very dangerous to try to say, how do you build the linkage? I mean, based on that model, Seth, it means that, with The Godfather, you sell horse heads. I mean, there are certain things that don't monetize that way. The monetization comes from the fact that you and I might watch the same program, but based on the demographics of our households, we're more interested in seeing we would respond differently to advertising content.
Fantastic.
And I think it's still going back to the fact that you're enabling these new ways. So you have T-commerce opportunities, context, and access points. And at some point, they weave together for the right answer for the right product.
Yeah, I want to add to that I think we're all going that way. I mean, because what you're talking about is the importance of bound, synchronized applications that are connected to whatever the television content is, whether that's programming or advertising. And, we're all about that in some fashion or another. And, to your selling 60s music on a 60s television show, the networks are doing that today. You just have to go online to do it. The thing is to connect that to television, right, which is probably the next step in the evolution of everything that we're talking about.
So I just want to add a couple things. I disagree with one thing that John said that I think is really important. I do not believe that TV watching online on a PC is the same experience as watching on TV. And I think we should never allow that to happen, and we need to maintain the integrity of what it means to watch on TV. The second thing I would say is we have to remember that
it was on a 46-inch TV that I was watching it.
Well, when you think about online distribution and monetization for video, there's different reporting, there's different uses of data, there's different economics, there's different sales processes. So I think we should be really careful not to jump too quickly to that model. The second thing I would say is you have to remember that TV is predicated, the big dollars on TV is predicated on a thing called scarcity. More inventory is not necessarily a good thing. So what interactivity does for VOD or TV is create unique packages. The problem is, how do you scale it? But that's how TV is bought and sold on the internet. Everything is a sponsorship buy. CBS or somebody sells March Madness, and they get a ton of dollars for it online, and then they have a huge tonnage buy from those advertisers. Yeah. So I think we should be careful not to just say online and the viewing experience is exactly the same just because you're watching the same content.
Well, just to jump on that, we do the same thing with Make March Madness on TV, that we enhance it with the first 3 rounds in all 4 games, and that consumer gets to really drive what shows and which game they want to show with real-time scores and stats. They have their bracket on the TV. And yes, we sell 2 sponsorships exclusive to create scarcity and to create something important for that advertiser.
Well, and I think that it's actually 2 things. There's scarcity around the really premium content. Everybody's always going to want to have their ad on the best content. Then there's these new avenues, which is really the long tail, finally coming to TV. And by introducing brand new advertisers to the platform, it's a way to actually drive and create the bigger pie. If you're just talking about the exact same advertisers, you're just shifting money around. So I think there's still premium advertisers on premium content, but there's brand new things with brand new advertisers.
Seth, can I just make one comment
Sure.
about this? We look at this business not as 20% premiums on the TV business or 13% premiums on the spot. We think the dollars that'll come to ITV will come from many other sources, whether it's freestanding inserts that currently go in newspapers, which in 5 years may be gone. So the point I'm trying to make on this is that I don't know how big the model is. And I don't know what it actually means to enhance an ad with a telescope to a VOD asset. Do I get a 10% premium? Do I have a fixed fee? One thing I do know is that there are many categories of business that want to capitalize on these technologies who don't buy TV. And I believe that the net sum gain of all this is the combination of all these new to TV dollars coming in, validating the uses of these various ITV assets, and that's where the big gain is.
But that's going to imply some use of addressability if you're going to be able to segment
For some,
the audience.
for others not.
Seth, I've been holding back about 15 things that I want to say. I'm not going to get them all out. I figure this is my last shot anyway. So, listen, I'm very concerned. This discussion is fascinating, but we're missing the most important part. I hate to break this to everyone, but not one person up here has talked about the consumer yet. And the consumer is what matters, okay?
He's
and
playing to the San Francisco crowd.
Consumers, we're talking about the technology and what can be done by the technology and all the great things that we can sell to consumers, but the reality is this fundamentally comes down to the fact that people watch television for entertainment purposes, generally. They do so today on 46-inch plasmas connected to their computer. From a consumer perspective, that is TV. From a technology or distribution perspective, it isn't traditional TV, but from a consumer perspective, it's absolutely no different. And just because the ad models that exist online and how that television programming is distributed are different than the commercial load and the linear approach that broadcast or cable networks take today, doesn't mean that the consumer's not sitting there saying, oh, I only have one ad because this is being delivered to me over the internet.
Well, there's
a
a delay because if the consumer is depending on shows being made with the revenues from broadband, they're going to be watching reruns of Get Smart
right, but
and
that's
not
a separate question.
Lost.
That's a separate question. Now, there are a couple other points I want to get, and I'm going to shut up. And
You get one more, and then I want to go to.
Anyone here familiar with the data that Publicis and the Pool and a number of providers did in the online video space over the last year? Anyone see those results? 5x improvement in ad impact simply when you let the consumer choose what advertising they want to watch. So question to the room, is that interactive TV advertising? If you simply let the consumer choose what ad they want to see, forget about click-through, forget about conversions, forget about selling them something, is that interactive advertising?
I always have problems with studies like that because that presumes that companies go along. I always give the example, there's a brand in New York called Entenmann's, and they sell chocolate cakes. And if you ask me, do I ever want to see an ad for Entenmann's, the answer is no. In fact, I never want to eat one, but still somehow they get it in front of me and I do eat them. And so it's a very dangerous thing to throw.
And for certain brands, that's going to be, the intrusiveness is going to be important to certain categories and certain brands, and to others, engagement and the consumer choosing to participate in the experience is what matters. And there's not one answer to this.
So we have Sean here, and Sean's business is entirely dependent on consumers. So let me ask you, help us with a couple of things. What percentage of your business now uses the ITV applications as opposed to the phone?
I can't say that, but publicly the internet is about 30%, and that was zero, a short number of years ago. And so I look at it more like the only slight disagreement I would have, mobile's growing right now. And so I was at the e-tail conference a couple weeks ago, same one I went to 6 months before that, and no one was talking about mobile. There was a couple of side panels. This 6 months later, thanks to the iPhone and Android and all these wonderful apps, every single retailer is building an application now on the iPhone, and it's a great experience. So Valpak used to get these coupons in the mail that I would throw right away. Now I have a Valpak app where before I go out to eat, I can say where I want to get money off, or if I'm going to get my hair cut or go to oil change. So I think of it more as we don't know what the consumer's going to want, but I think that it's not inconceivable that I'm watching Travel Channel and it's something I'm interested in, and I go up to a VOD to learn more about that, and then an Expedia app comes in, and I book my vacation. I mean, and it's the same thing in the early days. I was in investment banking when the internet came of age, and everybody's like, who would really, buy something on the internet? I mean, who's going to really trust the internet? And to answer your question from HSN standpoint is, when we launch an application, there's no ramp up in terms of clicks. The first day that they see the bug, you go right to the level, more or less, that we see consistently. And so people are not afraid to click. And then once they're in there, we see I can't say the rate, but very, very high repeat rate. And so it's convenient, it's making their life easier, so they continue to use it.
So now we're going to go to sort of a lightning round, and I think we have 15 minutes left, so I'm going to leave some time for questions. So yesterday at the 4As, there was a panel on addressability, and Bill Harvey said, he made what I thought was a very interesting point about addressability. He said that it's not higher prices, it's lower prices, because if you calculate it based on your effective reach of an audience, it goes less. And he suggested there's a model that 42.5% of the upside of that increased benefit should go to the infrastructure provider or the distributor. 42.5% should go to the inventory, so 42.5% to the inventory holder, infrastructure provider, and 42.5% to the advertiser, and the rest to some of the schnooks on this side of the table. Real quickly, do technology companies ever get a piece of the action? And I just want sort of yes or no's as we go quickly down. So why don't you go, Seth, if you can start.
Yes.
Yes.
Peter Lowe gets a piece of my action.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is the question, do they get? Or
Yeah,
should
do they get?
Well, I say yes, but I also think it's not just technology companies. It's also data companies that can provide the targeting services to deliver the ad.
Well, I throw that into the broad term of technology companies.
Okay, so it's technology and data research
Yes.
companies. Okay, then yes.
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 Of course.
I guess you have a consensus.
Comcast, you okay with that one? Okay.
And I know it's a lightning round, but one of the things that you mentioned is interesting, and it's something that bears thought, and that is that addressable, and I think Bill was speaking to it. I'm not going to argue with his numbers, but one of the questions we have to ask ourselves about addressable advertising is based on how it's sold. As was said earlier, if that increases inventory, that changes the whole dynamics of scarcity.
But it's very simplistic. Seth, I know I'm going to be aggressive now. It's a very simplistic question, and Bill's numbers are bad, because if data drives performance 10x in one scenario and 2x in another, and interactivity drives performance 10x in another scenario, and data has very little impact, there's not one calculation.
So this
should be a value-based economy. It should be a value-based chain.
This is
of where the
exactly
money
one of the
flows.
questions is that we always hear about premiums on CPMs and things like that. Yet one of the things that I sort of consistently hear from people is that this type of service is going to be worth more to some advertisers than another. And what sort of business model is going to allow that to happen?
So the advertisers that it's not worth more to are the ones who don't really want to sell anything?
Well, they pay as much. In other words, do you charge the same based, Adam's got a business where they're going to convert their data and knowledge of customers into selling advertisements, right? And presumably, depending on what vertical you are and what companies, that's going to have different effects. Those verticals won't all perform the same way.
It's exactly how search works today, and it's exactly why there's $20 billion being spent there, because the
Because of
market
the
is
auction.
liquid. The market is liquid, and advertisers define the targeting criteria, i.e. the keyword. They don't have to rely on gender and age and do it consistently in the marketplace the way the marketplace tells them to do it. They also get to value how they bid, what the value of their customers are. And that's what's going to happen in the display marketplace. It's the only way that this works.
It does get back to the ROI, which I don't know whether we wanted to talk about or not talk about, but if you don't have a return on that investment, then the investment's not going to come. But if you've got an obvious return on the investment, then it will.
We've done studies to isolate the different drivers that map to different features. And so some of them would be behavioral targeting, geo-targeting, interactivity, dwell time, richness. There's like 7 different things. And you're not going to get the same thing out of the same campaign. So one may make the inventory or make that avail 15% more valuable. Another one might make it 250% more valuable.
But can you charge for that?
I think that's the premise. Then I think we have to start trying.
But there's a huge, look, I've worked at one of the internet portals that have scale in the 300, 400 hundreds of millions of users. You need enormous scale to make a large, I mean, I'm sure you're aggregating scale, that's an approach, but you need to be very large in order to make a big gross revenue business off of data alone. Some of the stuff that's just going to beat that on revenue, if you're not that large, is the very premium stuff and the sponsorships. They have to coexist correctly together. One should not replace the other, because then you start dropping the overall revenue.
Keith, do you charge the same thing for all customers no matter what they do with the technology?
We do. The way that we've set up our business with dedicated channels is the channel is a channel, and you can use it for whatever purpose you want. Yes, from an ROI perspective, is a coupon for a tissue different value than a brochure in the home for a $50,000 automobile? Sure. But that's just where that perception really lies on that advertiser to see what that output is.
So I want to thank you for putting up with all of my questions, and I think we have about 7 or 8 minutes left, and we wanted to open it up to questions from people in the audience. And so the woman in the orange, match.
When you were discussing whether it's TV or not, regardless, for the consumer, regardless of its source, you were saying that the consumer doesn't care that they only got one ad. I think that's what you're saying.
No, I wasn't saying that they don't care. I was saying that they don't recognize that the reason they got one ad was because the video is being delivered over the internet through a video player environment on the internet.
I don't know if any of you do this, but that's how I watch TV at home, by attaching my computer to the TV, and it's because I'm only getting one ad.
It's what?
That's why I'm watching not
Right.
cable, because I'm only getting one ad.
Right, but it's still a TV experience to you, correct? You are watching whatever show you're consuming on your television set the same way you would have if internet TV didn't exist and you were forced to sit through 8 commercials in a pod watching it on the couch.
But if the discussion is about the economics of that content and the advertising supporting it, it seems like that comes into play.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the model doesn't work. It's why you see, a dramatic attempt by the big networks and the video distribution companies to figure out how they monetize online video at the same revenue per half hour or revenue per viewer rate that they're getting in traditional TV. Right now, they don't generate anywhere near the amount of money that they're getting in traditional TV. That's why they aren't so thrilled about having massive distribution.
Question? Hey, not all the questions for Adam. I'm just kidding.
Sorry. That TV viewing is the same experience. What about people who are a bit younger, who haven't grown up with television as their primary medium, who are used to watching programming on the internet, not necessarily turn to television? I would think the filters that they use when they look at television are going to be different, so it's a different user experience.
I think it's a different user experience only because I'm going to do something that I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for. So I happen to be in a book club with Seth back in New York. And one of the gentlemen who's in our book club at one of the meetings gave an example about how he had just gone out and bought a 50-inch plasma and put it into his living room, and his 2 teenage daughters have not watched the television in 3 years. They would much prefer go into their bedroom and watch video on the internet on their PC. All right? And, that's the challenge you're talking about. Is there still an opportunity for an advertiser to engage with that viewer in that experience? Absolutely. Is it the same as what it was in traditional broadcast on the 50-inch plasma? Not today, but I also think the mistake we're making is we're assuming that today's device and platform and distribution models are the end game. And I hate to tell everyone, they're not. They're nowhere close to where we're going to be 10 years from now.
But Adam, I think the big thing we're not paying attention to is availability of the content. Right? So you're making a general assumption that the same content is available on the TV and online at the same exact time. And I think what you're going to see with TV everywhere and everything else is, and we just saw with MTV, pulling back some of their premium-based content online, you're going to start seeing a windowing of content. So online distribution is absolute, online to the TV is an absolute, but you're going to see a windowing of content as driven by how people make money, because they're not going to give up that $70 billion TV spend no matter what we as consumers think. They can't. So I agree with everything that you guys are saying, but the economics of content are driving, and carriage agreements will drive distribution consumption paradigms
Yeah,
and how interactivity plays.
Nick's correct, but the key word that we've all talked about is it's the content. So the Daily Show is the Daily Show. Today, it is not operationally and politically feasible to build a big, easy-to-execute ad buy across the Daily Show everywhere where it can happen. Assume that that's simple, then that might impact the windowing somewhat as long as the economics work for all the parties involved. But the consumers still like the content and they just want to be able to see it.
And you're also assuming that the only producers of content are the current producers of content who control the business. And I would argue that what you're going to see is if the traditional content companies window and restrain content from flowing out through the distribution models, you'll have new entrants come in and produce shows and not window it and build business models that work with content being delivered openly everywhere.
Other questions from the audience? One, and then we'll take you.
My biggest question, and I wanted to thank Mr. Turner because I thought he had a really great point about what people do with the remote. They have to lean forward and pick the thing up. And that really weighs in on like how TV interactive advertising works. You don't really have a whole lot of time to get up and react to it. But my question is that why are we waiting for a click to evidence interest? Why can't we know, just by virtue of the fact that they're on the channel, that there is interest? Why, like on the internet, when I log into a certain site and I have a login, I have a cookie that basically lets that site know that I've come back.
Yeah, that's true. And so a lot of the things we were talking about, you may be engaging within an application or within a program, and that informs an ad insertion later that you really weren't aware of. So all of these things work together.
Great. One more question from the gentleman over there.
I was just curious in terms of the ComScore testing, if they included any kind of personalization or targeting in terms of the click-throughs of those advertisements?
So two different pieces of research that I cited. On the second one that we'll be releasing, that was very controlled to just look. So we controlled the ad to be related to the content, so it was very, very controlled. On the first piece, it was looking broadly at anybody who's clicking. But is there more to your question in terms of where you're going with that?
No, I'm just curious. You know, I occasionally find something to click on, and usually it's because you know, I've been cookied and you know, Yahoo or Google is serving kind of a personalized ad to me. And I would think that those types of advertisements have a higher click-through than just the general internet.
Sure. I mean, the click-through rates on the internet are extraordinarily low, as we cited earlier, across the board, across everything. That doesn't mean that the more personalized ad doesn't work. It just means that you don't have to click it. It might work. It leaves an impression. It might have a branding message. It's just that you weren't clicking it.
So, listen, I'm sorry, we're out of time, and I wanted to thank everyone on the panel because you all did a spectacularly well job, and I wanted the audience, if you could show some appreciation for the panel. So I think they were great. And I think we touched on some very good ideas about clicking and whether that's related to the program and whether it's a nature or a nurture and how we can build engagement. And I think, you know, hopefully we'll be back, and Tracy will let us back at the end of, you know, next year, and we'll see how we did and how good people's predictions were.
Seth, you have a new job at ITVT.
Thank you.
Moderator, definitely. Thank you very much, everyone. Seth deserves applause, actually. Can you give him applause? He's a master moderator. Absolutely. And thanks to everybody who was on this panel. Everyone, I'm sure, was wrapped